Ed, you've got a great piece in the Financial Times, fascinating, on Bidenomics. But I want to pull apart from it, talk about Bidenomics, if you will. But you bring up something that's fascinating that I don't think a lot of people are talking about, and they haven't noticed that in 2 years, Joe Biden passed more bipartisan legislation, more meaningful legislation to shape the economy than Bill Clinton did in his 8 or Barack Obama did in his 8 years. So in 2 years, I'm sure those gentlemen might not agree, but everybody else would, that he did more in 2 years than those two presidents did in 16 years as far as significant legislation that actually could change the direction of the economy, and did.
He did. And in that respect, he really is. If you remember back to the beginning of Biden's administration, we were all debating, is he going to be an FDR because of the drama of the circumstances with COVID? Is he going to be a Jimmy Carter and perhaps, not have a coherent economic legacy? Or is he going to be an LBJ, a Lyndon Baines Johnson? And I think he's proving himself much like LBJ, because of his Senate experience, because of his legislative feel. He's proving himself to be as productive as LBJ in terms of getting bills passed, in a way playing LBJ to Barack Obama's JFK in that respect. None of the oratory, none of the eloquence of an Obama, but perhaps a lot more of a track record to show for it. In terms of how do you define Bidenomics, I would say it's a very simple definition, not Reaganomics. That's the definition of Bidenomics. A belief that there's got to be more than trickle down to get the American middle class going again. There has to be some federal intervention, and that's what we've been seeing. Big infrastructure bill, big semiconductor bill. I mean, a lot of and of course the Inflation Reduction Act. These are major pieces of legislation.
Yeah, it's so fascinating, Reverend Al, that we've been talking about the United States, how it's been doing globally, stronger than it has been. Its military relative to the rest of the world, diplomatically, NATO stronger than it's ever been. But you look economically, and we've talked about it before. I mean, unemployment's at record low. Black unemployment for Black Americans at record low. One stat a couple months ago that the unemployment rate for Black men lower than the unemployment rate for white men. There's been extraordinary progress on so many fronts. And there's no doubt, again, you read Ed's piece, you walk away understanding this is the most significant president in his first 2 years since Ronald Reagan when it comes to shaping the economy. The question is, why is that not filtering through to voters?
I think the messaging of that leaves a lot to be desired because there clearly is significant achievement, significant legislation, and clearly Joe Biden and the Biden-Harris presidency has delivered in many ways, from infrastructure to inflation reduction, etc. And the employment numbers or unemployment numbers, even in the Black community. But I think what you must also recognize, what is going to really, I think, energize a lot of support for them, is what is happening in contrast. When you see the affirmative action decision of the Supreme Court and you see the canceling of the forgiveness of student loans, and Donald Trump jumps out there and reminds everybody, I put 3 of those justices on the court. I did a third of the court. I think that's going to energize the base as well as the substance of passing that legislation. So if anything is going to help energize a turnout for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, it will be Donald Trump on top of substance. It's like putting salt on your meat. And I think the more he talks, I think the more Joe Biden will benefit from it. Don't get in his way, Mr. Biden.
Yeah. Elise, the same question goes to you, and I just wonder if the successes of this presidency are not translating, are Democrats not doing their job, or are people just not tuning in yet to the election process?
Mika, I think that Ed really nails it in his piece when he says the middle class is not feeling the benefits of Biden economics, and that Biden's agenda, his economic agenda, is basically at the mercy of the Federal Reserve, which Ed describes as mildly hawkish, which is very true. And so without the middle class feeling impact and all Americans still seeing the impact of inflation in their everyday lives when they go to buy pretty much anything, it makes it difficult to get any other part of the message across.
Ed, this is David Ignatius. I have one question for you as we end our discussion. At the end of this week in Vilnius, where we'll have lots of tableaus of the Western leaders and all those terrible group photographs that it seemed required. What do you think the actual net result will be in terms of Western support for Ukraine, Ukraine's ability to win this war soon, and a position in the West to deal with a Russia that really is in radical fragmentation now?
That's a very good question. I mean, what you were saying earlier about the warm emotional embrace, and there's no doubt there's going to be a very, very strong sort of optics with Zelensky and the 31 NATO leaders who are going to be there in Vilnius. That's a lot of countries. There are guests also, non-NATO guests from the Asia-Pacific region, Japan, Australia. This is a big tableau, and it's support for Ukraine. Now, Ukraine's not going to join NATO. And there's not going to be at this summit, and there's not going to be a timetable for when it will join NATO. But the direction is absolutely clear. And to some extent, the NATO membership is a bit of a red herring. I mean, the primary security challenge of our age, as leaders will make clear in Vilnius, is to defeat Russia in Ukraine. And there will be no doubt that there is consensus on that question in Vilnius. And so I think that when the timing of NATO membership for Ukraine, it's being given a bit too much airtime. The nature and the strength of Western support across the board is going to be reaffirmed and be not open to question.
U.S. national editor at the Financial Times, Ed Luce, thank you very much for coming on this morning. And the Washington Post, David Ignatius, thank you as well.